Zooey Mama, how's it going, everybody? We have another exciting new card coming to Marvel Snap, who is Corvus Glaive. So I'm going to go over the details of his ability, 3 decks that I've put together that I think he will work great in, and then we'll give my final thoughts on if he's worth trying to get right away with tokens or spotlight caches, or if you should wait because he may not be worth it. So Corvus Glaive is a 3-cost, 5-powered card with the on-reveal ability to discard 2 cards randomly from your hand to get +1 max energy. So this is a really interesting ability. Right away, it's kind of like a hybrid of Electro and Hellcow. He essentially has like both their abilities without Electro's harmful ongoing. And before we get into the details of how he works, he is going to go into Series 5, so he will be a full 6,000 tokens. And he's going to be in spotlights with X23 and Gladiator. So these cards are both pretty solid. X23 is basically a staple in every destroy deck. And Gladiator is seeing a good amount of play, especially in like Tempo and Sarah control decks now that he's a 3/8, okay? And I'm excited for this because Gladiator is like the only card I don't own. So now I have a chance to finally complete my collection. So to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly for Corvus Glaive, let's start off with the good points. First of all, he ramps your deck. There are just not many cards in Snap that can currently do that. We have a lot of energy discount cards like Zabu, Sarah, or Vanna, but for ramp, it's basically just Electro, sometimes X23, Wave for just like a single turn. Like there's not that many ways to actually just permanently increase your energy. Okay, so he's one of the few, so that right away could make him pretty strong. And he has a great stat line. He's a 3/5. Electro is a 3/2. He has 3 more power than Electro, and instead of having the ongoing ability that limits you to only being able to play 1 card per turn like Electro, he instead discards 2 random cards, okay? But both him and Electro have a downside, and Corvus just has 3 more power. So great stats there. He can ramp and add power to your board at the same time. He does synergize with Proxima Midnight, who I will go ahead and show on the screen here. Proxima is a 5/7, and when she's discarded, she will get played on your lowest powered location. Okay, and that's great. You get discarded, you get free 7 power on a location where you need her most, and Proxima is coming out next week. So right after Corvus is out of spotlight caches, Proxima will come in. Okay, so we've got these, 2-card major synergy. They're pretty much going to be played together almost all the time. They're just coming out 1 week apart. And so the downside can be an upside, question mark. So Corvus discards 2 random cards, okay? And like Hellcow, that doesn't seem very good. And Hellcow has good stats for that reason. He's a 4/8. But if you have enough cards where you don't care what gets discarded, it's no longer a downside, right? Electro's ongoing is pretty much always a downside. If you don't get rid of it by like killing Electro or negating his ongoing, then you just basically play big stuff, but you can only do 1 a turn. So the decks basically never have time for cheap options, okay? But with Corvus, if you can discard cards like X23, which would give you more energy, by the way, if Corvus discards X23, you're getting +2 energy that turn for the next turn, which is insane. And he could discard Wolverine to get power on the board, Proxima Midnight power on the board, Helicarrier fills up your hand, and the list goes on. So if it turns out that Corvus's downside isn't actually bad because you have a deck where you're happy to have stuff randomly discarded, then he's just like Electro with 3 more power and no downside. That could be pretty nuts, okay? So if his downside can be negated, which if you have enough cards that synergize with discard, his downside can be negated, then it's just good, okay? Now for the bad, he does limit deck building options here. Again, the times when his downside is a possible upside is because you have a deck that is built for him. So he's maybe not as flexible as Electro, but Electro also isn't the most flexible because you're limited to 1 card per turn. But it does take into consideration, can you play a pure ramp deck, or is he just stuck to discard archetypes? Okay, and we're gonna have to see when he comes out. He will sometimes ruin your play for the next turn. Maybe you're happy to go to 5 energy on turn 4, but the card you were going to play that turn got discarded. Okay, again, he's discarding 2 random cards, so sometimes that's going to screw you over. And that's why he is going to limit your deck building options, because you need options. You can't just have one turn 5 card that you plan to play every time, because sometimes you're going to lose it. And then more power creep. Is he just better than Electro? If the discard can be mitigated, or if it's just not that big of a deal, he's just Electro with 3 more power. And again, let's say Corvus discards Proxima, and let's say he discards X23. Okay, you would get Proxima's 7 power on the board, and you would get X23's 2 power on the board. So that's plus 9 power, plus Corvus's 5 already. It means you'd play Corvus, he would be a 3 cost, 14 power card, that would be giving you permanently plus 1 energy, and for the next turn, an additional plus 1 energy from X23. Okay, so imagine taking Electro, removing his ongoing, and giving Electro like 10 or 12 power. It's possible. Some games that's going to happen. So Corvus could just be a make or break on turn 3. You play him turn 3. If he discards good stuff, you basically win the game. If he discards bad stuff, maybe you lost yourself the game, or at least put yourself in a bad position. But this might really just push Electro out of the equation if Corvus is able to fairly consistently produce better value. So before I go into my 3 deck ideas for Corvus Glaive, I do have this little reminder here to help me remind you, and asking you to like this video and subscribe if you're finding it helpful. I do cover these kind of videos for every single new card release for Marvel Snap. I also cover just the new seasons and the cards that are data mined for them, give my early thoughts, and then give more detailed breakdowns like this one here. So please subscribe and join the community if this is helpful for you and you're happy to see more resources like this. So let's get into those 3 decks. So first up is the list that I'm actually most excited for Corvus. It's actually a ramp list. It's not a discard list, okay? And I'm most excited for it because if it works, again, this is where I talk about the power creep on Electro and just Corvus's ability to be like an Electro with better stats. Because oftentimes with Electro decks, they sometimes run a Devil Dinosaur because your hand gets full, you can only play 1 card a turn. So here with Corvus, I mean, so what if you discard 2 cards? Usually you don't play all your cards anyways if you're an Electro deck. You always have extra cards in hand. So if you discard some cards, you have some other options. You're just happy to ramp. That's the #1 priority. You could even do a deck with Electro, Corvus, and Wave, which basically guarantees that you get a ramp card on turn 3. But here I took out Wave since you can help your opponent play big stuff, and you know there's a lot of Lockjaw and Hella decks running around. But we've got Maria Hill and Snowguard. You play them, they're power on the board, but they keep your hand full. Same thing with Mirage, they keep your hand full. So by the time it comes around to play Electro or Corvus, Corvus is going to discard some stuff, but he's probably discarding some random cheap cards that you got from Maria Hill, Snowguard, Mirage. And if he does discard some bigger stuff, we've got options, okay? Even if he gets rid of like Dr. Doom and Goliath, we do have White Tiger who we can also hit with Odin, okay? So Odin's got 3 good targets here. Arrow could also be a decent target. But if one of those main, on reveal cards gets discarded, it's fine. We've got some backup options. We do also have Sandman in here to try to disable your opponent. And they were just okay if stuff gets discarded, I think. I think we really don't mind. So I don't know if you need to play Corvus in a discard deck. My thoughts are you might be able to just play him in a ramp deck like this one. So I'm most excited for this one. I think it's a bit more experimental, but I think it's promising. Next up, I've got a collector discard combo deck, and we're probably going to see a lot of decks like this with Corvus. I think this is the most obvious home. You get cards like Morbius and or the collector down, and then just start discarding everything. Okay, we've got Swarm in here, Apocalypse, Helicarrier, and Dawkins Blade, and so we're happy to just discard all of those cards. Try and discard as much as possible. That will power up the collector, that will power up Morbius, and we'll even get the nice ramp from Corvus. So this is just pretty straightforward. I think this is going to be the most common archetype we see with Corvus, but it is still kind of hit or miss, combo heavy. Sometimes you don't get the combo pieces, or it just doesn't discard the Swarms right away, or the Apocalypse or Helicarrier. So I think this deck will be effective, but I just think it will be pretty popular and, you know, kind of unoriginal, but we'll see how it does. And lastly, we've got this full RNG discard deck. I do also have Proxima Midnight in here. You could put her even in the last deck or even the first one. Proxima is going to work with Corvus. Any deck that has Corvus, you could reasonably put Proxima in. But here, I think she's basically needed. And the interesting thing here is we might just like have a full archetype now. We might really have this full new kind of archetype or really core discard package. Half of this deck we are happy to see get discarded. We've got X-23, Wolverine, Swarm, Proxima, Apocalypse, and Helicarrier. 6 cards that are good to discard. We literally want to discard those cards. That's half of our deck. And so in here, we've got just random full RNG discard cards. Colleen is a bit targeted, but then we've got Gambit, Corvus, Hellcow. Okay, and then MODOK will discard everything. So this one's pretty much just play stuff and discard stuff. And the odds that you discard something good are 50% and above. Okay, I mean, it's just that simple. You're just gonna get good stuff. And so here, we're not even looking for Corvus's ramp as much. We're more so just using his discard abilities. Okay, yeah, the +1 energy might be nice. It's definitely not gonna hurt. But more so, we're just happy that Corvus discards 2 things. And then we get turn 4 with Hellcow discarding 2 things. And Hellcow is overstated because, again, this discard 2 random things is supposed to be bad. But if half of our deck is good to discard, then we just want to discard as much as possible. So then we might just have a bunch of overstated discard cards whose downsides are actually upsides, and they're good for us. So this deck could just go crazy. This could just be a shell a week after when Proxima is in the game. It might just be like free discard deck, right? There's just like no downside, but you've got these huge power, big stack cards. I mean, this could really pop off, so I'm excited for this one. So let's get into my final review for Corvus. So here's a look at the Spotlight variant that is coming out for Corvus when he's in the caches. It's a pretty cool variant, I'm not gonna lie. And even the X-23 and Gladiator ones are not bad. I think it's a Peach Momoko and a Ink Pulp Gladiator. So in terms of Corvus's real potentials and my ratings for each category, in terms of being fun, I think he's pretty good. You know, RNG can screw you over. You sometimes will just discard something you wanted and you'll cry and you'll retreat, but maybe you just lose 1 cube. And overall, that kind of RNG or madness, unpredictability can be fun, okay? Because when it works, it's just gonna seem so crazy and awesome. And when it doesn't, maybe you're sad, but still it adds some crazy moments. So I do think he's a very fun card. And he's also doing 2 things. He's giving you energy and he's discard. Cards that do 2 things, if there are 2 good things, they're usually very good. And the downside, again, could be an upside, but it's a bit inconsistent, which makes it more fun. In terms of being flexible, I don't think it's the worst. I think a lot of people are just thinking of Corvus in a discard deck, like the one I showed with the Collector, where you want to just discard stuff to power up your Collector because, you know, you're adding cards to hand with Swarm and Helicarrier. But I really do think he has potential in just like the full discard package deck and with a ramp list without any other discards. And you could even throw in like Helicarrier to that if you wanted, but really I don't think losing 2 cards in a deck where you don't play most of your cards is that bad. So my guess is actually his flexibility is okay, that you can play him in discard, the combo discard, and just rampless without discard. So I think there's room to experiment with him, and that's going to help him out a bit. In terms of being competitive, I think he's good as a base, and I have this red star here for amazing. I don't know what's going to look like once Proxima comes out, okay? It's possible that Corvus comes out and the first week he's good, or even seems pretty strong, and then the week after, when Proxima comes out, his value just goes like through the roof, right? Because Proxima will just add 7 free power to your board, and she's another good target to be discarded. So it's possible, I mean, he's going to get better the week after for sure. Once Proxima out, he is better. But it's possible he's good by himself, and then Proxima just really breaks through that other level with him, okay? And just really breaks like that power ceiling, and they need to nerf that combo somehow. So my overall thoughts for Corvus are to get this card. I'm going to be getting it with Spotlight caches because I need Gladiator. I maybe would not go for it with tokens. I do think Spotlight caches is the way to go, but I would get this card, and that's really for two main reasons. First of all, even if you wait a couple days to see how he does, we won't know how he works with Proxima until the next week, and he will already be out of Spotlight caches. Okay, so you're kind of taking an early guess or hope that he's going to be solid once Proxima releases, whether he's just good or he's amazing. But also, he's a card that ramps, and that means he's always going to have potential for some future decks and combos. Electro is a bit limited because any future combos, it can't be stuff where you're planning to play multiple things on the same turn, which really eliminates a lot of stuff. But for Corvus, he's always going to have potential. I think he just gets more value over time, and I think there will be a time when he gets too much value, and him or the main package he's in probably sees a bit of a nerf. Okay, whether that happens right away, whether that happens in 1 week when Proxima comes out, or whether it happens like a month or two down the road. Okay, I don't know when it's going to happen, but he's got great stats for such a good ability where his downside can be mitigated to some extent. So my recommendation is pick him up. Try to pick him up with Spotlight caches, even if you don't plan to play him right away. And we won't know how good he is with Proxima until he's already out of Spotlight caches. So I say get him while you can instead of having some regrets after Proxima is released. So those are my thoughts on Corvus. Let me know what you think of him in the comments down below. What decks and combos you plan to play with him. If you think just him discarding 2 stuff is really good or really bad, or what you're excited for him to ramp into. I think he's actually better for just discarding stuff than the ramp in terms of discard deck packages. But for ramp decks, obviously I like the +1 energy. So let me know what you think of him. And until then, stay positive. I'll see you next time.